I was at the gym the other day, absolutely dying on the rowing machine. My legs were screaming, my lungs were on fire. And the guy on the rower next to me, who wasn't even breaking a sweat, by the way, he looks over and says, "Yeah, you got to push through that lactic acid. Just flush it out."
The classic locker room diagnosis.
Exactly. We've all been conditioned to think of lactate as, like, the enemy. It's the exhaust fume. It's the metabolic trash that clogs up the machine and makes everything hurt.
Right.
But I've been reading through this stack of medical literature you sent over, and it seems like in the high-stakes world of organ transplantation, that whole narrative is, well, it's completely wrong.
It's not just wrong, it's almost the exact opposite of the truth. I mean, if you're a transplant surgeon, lactate isn't trash at all.
Yeah.
It's a crystal ball.
A crystal ball.
We are talking about a simple metabolic marker that can look at a heart or a liver organs that have been cut off from a blood supply, organs that are technically dying, and tell us with incredible precision, I can be saved, or no, I am too far gone.
So today we're doing a deep dive into the operating room to play metabolic detective. We're going to uncover how this really misunderstood molecule is helping surgeons perform the impossible. I mean, bringing organs back from the brink of death using some properly sci-fi machinery.
It really is. It's a physiological thriller.
Yeah.
And to understand it, we have to look at a tale of two organs. It's a bit of an odd couple situation. You have the heart and you have the liver.
Okay.
And they have a completely different relationship with lactate.
One loves it, one hates it.
One eats it, one cleans it. It's this physiological tug of war that ultimately determines whether a transplant patient lives or dies.
Okay, so before we get to the life or death stuff, let's set the stage with some basic biology. Because I think most of us stop thinking about lactate after high school gym class. You mentioned the heart and the liver. Let's start with the heart. You call it the consumer.
I do.
Huh?
And this is probably the biggest misconception people have. We tend to think of the heart as this, delicate pump that needs pure, pristine energy.
Right.
But metabolically, the heart is a workhorse. It's a hungry engine. And it is not a picky eater.
So it doesn't just run on glucose.
Not at all. In fact, the heart actually prefers lactate in many situations. It treats it like premium fuel. Even right now, while you're just sitting there, your heart is pulling circulating lactate out of your blood, about 1 millimolar worth, and it's oxidizing it.
Oxidizing it, meaning just burning it for energy.
Exactly. It converts lactate into pyruvate, then into acetyl-CoA.
Mm-hmm.
And acetyl-CoA enters the Krebs cycle, the energy factory of the cell, to create ATP.
ATP being the energy currency.
Right. So while your leg muscles might be screaming about lactate during a sprint because they're producing it faster than they can chlor it, your heart is basically saying, hey, send it my way.
Saying, yum, more please.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And here's the kicker. When you exercise, when the heart is under stress and beating faster, it doesn't stop using lactate. It actually ramps up consumption.
No way.
Yeah. It oxidizes lactate proportionally to its workload. It's often called the forgotten fuel because of this.
That is a total rebranding. Okay, so the heart is the consumer. What about the liver?
The liver is the clearer. If the heart is the engine, the liver is, maybe the municipal recycling plant is a better analogy.
A recycling plant. I like that.
Its job is to keep the blood clean. The hepatocytes, the liver cells, they take that lactate out of the bloodstream and convert it back into glucose. This is a famous biological pathway called the Cori cycle.
I vaguely recall this. The liver takes the waste, turns it back into sugar, and then sends it back out for the body to use.
You nailed it. It's an energy shuttle. So in a healthy body, you have this perfect ecosystem. The muscles make lactate, the liver clears and recycles it, and the heart consumes it as fuel. It's all balanced.
But we aren't talking about healthy bodies today. We're talking about organ donation. And in that scenario, the whole system has definitely crashed.
The power has gone out. This is the crux of the problem. When we harvest an organ for transplant, we're dealing with ischemia.
Ischemia. That's just the medical term for lack of blood flow.
Yeah. Correct. And when blood flow stops, oxygen stops. And oxygen is the key ingredient for, efficient energy production. Without it, cells panic. They switch from aerobic metabolism, using oxygen, to anaerobic metabolism, a desperate survival mode.
Like running a generator on dirty fuel because the main grid is down?
That is a great analogy. The cells burn through their energy reserves, their ATP, very quickly. And the byproduct of this inefficient, desperate process is lactate.
Ah, so now lactate isn't fuel anymore. Now it's the evidence of a crisis.
Precisely. It just starts piling up. It causes the cellular environment to become acidic metabolic acidosis. The cells begin to swell. The internal machinery starts to break down.
And this is the tension the surgeon faces. They are looking at a donor organ that is essentially drowning in its own metabolic waste. And they have to make a judgment call. Is this reversible, or is this organ just too damaged?
And for a long time, that was a massive gamble, especially with a specific type of donor. This brings us to a really important distinction in the transplant world: DBD versus DCD.
Right, I see these acronyms all over the source material. Break them down for us.
Okay, so DBD stands for donation after brain death. These are the traditional donors we usually think of. The patient has suffered a catastrophic brain injury, they're legally dead, but, and this is the key, their heart is still beating.
Okay.
Machines are keeping the blood flowing, oxygenating the organs right up until the moment of surgery.
So in a DBD donor, the organs haven't really experienced that power outage yet.
Exactly. The lights stayed on. So their lactate levels are usually normal.
Mm.
But then you have DCD, donation after circulatory death.
This is where the heart has actually stopped beating before the surgeons go in.
Right. Life support is withdrawn. The heart stops. There's a mandatory wait period to declare death, usually about 5 minutes. Then and only then can the surgeons rush in.
That sounds incredibly frantic.
It is controlled chaos. Because during that time, from the moment the heart stops until the surgeons can flush the organs with cold preservative solution, those organs are just sitting there, inside the body, warm, with zero blood flow.
And that's the warm ischemia I keep seeing.
Yes. Warm ischemia is the enemy. It's a metabolic storm. The cells are chewing through their reserves, dumping lactate, and accruing what we call a lactate debt.
So if you were to look at the profile of a DCD liver or heart compared to a DBD one, it looks completely different.
Starkly different. The metabolomic profiling shows DCD organs have these massive spikes in interstitial lactate and a very high lactate to pyruvate ratio. They're, chemically screaming for help.
Okay, so put yourself in the surgeon's shoes. You have a patient on the waiting list, desperate for a heart or a liver. You have a DCD organ available, but you know it's been through this warm ischemia crisis. It's stressed. It's acidic. How do you know if it's trash or treasure?
Historically, you didn't. You kind of guessed based on donor age and how long the heart was stopped. And because the risk of failure was so high, many of these organs were just
Discarded.
we threw them away. That's tragic to think about with the shortage.
It is. But that has changed. We have entered the machine era. Okay, this is the part that starts to feel a bit like science fiction. We aren't putting organs in those generic ice coolers anymore.
Not for these high-risk cases, no. We're using normothermic machine perfusion, or NMP, for livers, and the organ care system, or OCS, for hearts.
Normothermic, so body temperature.
Yes. Instead of freezing the organ to slow down its death, we hook it up to a machine that pumps warm, oxygenated blood through it. We essentially bring the organ back to life, but outside the body.
You're rebooting the system.
We are test driving it. And the dashboard for that test drive, it's the lactate level.
Okay, so let's go back to our odd couple. The liver first. The clearer. You've got the stressed out DCD liver. You hook it up to the machine. What are you watching for?
You're looking for it to do its job. You want to see it clear that massive pile of lactate that built up during the warm ischemia. We now have very specific criteria, almost like a scorecard.
I saw the Birmingham criteria in the notes. What's the magic number there?
The Birmingham team found that if the lactate levels in the perfusate, the fluid running through the liver, if they dropped to less than or equal to 2.5 millimoles per liter within 4 hours, that liver is viable.
2.5 within 4 hours. That's the cutoff.
It's one of them. There are others. The Groningen criteria are even stricter. They want to see it get down to less than 1.7. And the Cambridge criteria, they look at the speed of the drop.
The speed.
Yeah, the velocity of the cleanup. They want to see the lactate falling by at least 4.4 millimoles per hour.
So it's not just is it low, it's how fast can you clean up this mess?
Exactly. It's a stress test. If the liver can crank up its metabolic machinery and clear that debt rapidly, it tells the surgeon, I'm functional. I can handle the load.
And this isn't just theoretical math, right? This actually saves lives.
It's revolutionized the field. There was a landmark study called the Vittle trial. They took livers that had been rejected, discarded by every other center because they were seen as too damaged.
So these are the organs that would have just gone in the bin.
Correct. They put them on these machines and they used that 2.5 millimole cutoff. If the liver could clear lactate down to that level, they transplanted it.
And the result?
100% 90-day survival for the livers that passed the test.
Wow. 100%.
100%. It proved that our old way of judging organs, just by, looking at them or checking the donor's history,
Yeah.
was flawed. The metabolic behavior, the lactate clearance, that was the true indicator of health.
That is incredible. Okay, now flip the script. What about the heart, the consumer? When you put a DCD heart on the organ care system, I assume we aren't looking for it to clear the blood in the same way.
No, we're looking for it to eat. We want to see the lactate disappear because the heart muscle is using it as fuel to beat.
It's the same result, lactate goes down, but for a totally different biological reason.
Exactly. When a DCD heart goes on the machine, it starts with high lactate because of that warm ischemia.
Okay.
We want to see the arterial lactate drop below 5 millimoles per liter. But, and this is important, we really want to see a downward trend.
A downward trend. Why is the trend more important than just the absolute number?
Because a rising lactate on the machine is a huge danger signal. It means the heart is still in anaerobic mode. It's not using oxygen efficiently. It's probably swelling, getting edematous.
It's still suffocating, even though you're pumping blood through it.
Right. And a heart that is producing lactate instead of consuming it is a heart that will likely fail if you transplant it. There was a pivotal study on DCD hearts showing that ending the perfusion with lactate under 5 was the single strongest predictor of success.
This brings up a really nuanced point. In the notes, there's a lot of talk about area under the curve. It sounds like high school calculus, but why does that matter more than a snapshot?
Well, think of it like a credit score versus a bank balance. A snapshot just tells you where you are right now.
Right.
The area under the curve tells you the cumulative history of the stress.
So if a liver starts with super high lactate and it takes, say, 6 hours to slowly bring it down,
Then the area under the curve is huge. That organ spent a long time bathing in acid. That predicts early dysfunction. Researchers even developed something called the Mi-AVE score based on this.
but if it starts high and just crashes down rapidly,
The area under the curve is small. The exposure to all that toxicity was brief. That organ is resilient. So we've moved from these static checklists to dynamic monitoring. We're watching a movie, not just looking at a photo.
I want to touch on one more acronym before we get to outcomes. NRP, normothermic regional perfusion. This is different from the box, right? This is happening inside the donor.
Yes. This is an in situ technique. Instead of taking the organ out and putting it in a box, doctors use a machine to restart circulation to the abdominal or thoracic organs inside the donor body,
Yeah.
but after death has been declared.
It's like a pre-test drive.
A warm-up lap, yeah. Now, does the lactate rule apply here? It's trickier, because now you aren't just circulating blood through one isolated liver, you're circulating it through the whole abdominal region. And the rest of the body has a massive lactate debt from the dying process.
So the liver might be working fine, but there's just too much trash coming in from everywhere else.
Exactly. You might not see the numbers hit that magic 2.5.
Yeah.
But, and this is the key, the trend is still your friend. Doctors look for that downward slope. If it's flatlining, that's bad. If it's trending down, even if it's still high, it means the liver is waking up. The machinery is turning on.
It's fascinating how much we rely on this one molecule, but I have to play devil's advocate. We have all these fancy machines, all these graphs, these curves and algorithms. Does it actually matter for the patient? I mean, are these transplants safe?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it? We can stare at graphs all day, but does the patient walk out of the hospital? Let's look at the hard data.
Start with the heart. DCD heart transplants used to be, well, they were considered very risky.
They were. But recent systematic reviews and meta-analyses are showing something remarkable. Survival rates for DCD heart transplants using these protocols are now comparable to standard DBD transplants. We're looking at about 93% survival at 6 months for DCD versus 91% for DBD.
Wait, so DCD is actually slightly higher in some cases?
In some data sets, yes. Statistically, they are basically indistinguishable. You are getting a heart that works just as well. However, and there's always a however in medicine,
There comes the catch.
there is a higher rate of something called PGD, primary graft dysfunction. This is when the heart struggles right after the transplant and needs mechanical support like a balloon pump to get going.
It sort of stumbles out of the gate.
Exactly. The rate is about 17% for DCD hearts versus 8% for standard donors. That's double the risk.
So the long-term survival is great, but those first few days can be scarier.
They can be. And that is why that strict lactate monitoring on the OCS machine is non-negotiable. We can achieve great survival, but we have to be incredibly selective. The lactate trend helps filter out the hearts that would cause severe PGD. It's our safety net.
What about the liver? I know the old ice cooler method was terrible for DCD livers.
Oh, it's a disaster. DCD liver stored on ice at very high rates of ischemic cholangiopathy.
Break that down.
The bile ducts, the plumbing of the liver, are just very sensitive to lack of oxygen. They would die off, leading to massive complications down the line. But the modern era has leveled the playing field.
Because of the warm perfusion machines.
Yes, using NRP and machine perfusion has essentially equalized the outcomes. One U.S. multicenter study showed that DCD livers treated with NRP had an early allograft dysfunction rate of only about 11%.
And what was it without the machines? For comparison.
Around 64%.
Hold on. From 64% dysfunction down to 11%, that is not a marginal gain. That is a paradigm shift.
It is. It transforms a high-risk organ into a standard risk organ. And the implication of that is huge. It means we can safely use thousands of organs that were previously considered too risky. We are expanding the donor pool significantly, all because we can read the metabolic tea leaves.
It really changes your perspective. We started this deep dive talking about a muscle burn in the gym, and we've ended up with this incredibly sophisticated stress test that saves lives.
It just highlights the elegance of physiology. Lactate isn't the enemy. It's a messenger. In the heart, it's a fuel source that proves the engine is running. In the liver, it's a workload that proves the filter is clear.
And for the surgeon, it's the difference between a successful transplant and a tragedy. The takeaway here seems to be about patience. It's not about the number you see the second you hook up the machine.
No. Panic is the enemy of good medicine. It's about watching the process. It's about the clearance trend. The lactate burden of DCD is real. These organs are hurt. But it is reversible. We just have to watch the curve to know when they've recovered.
So before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought. We've talked about how predictive these numbers are, the area under the curve, the slope of the drop, the strict criteria. It's all math.
It is remarkably consistent math.
Well, if it's that consistent, are we heading toward a future where the surgeon doesn't make the call? Right now, a human looks at the graph and decides. But could we see a world where the machine analyzes the lactate trend, calculates the probability of success, and decides automatically whether to accept the organ?
That is the next ethical frontier, isn't it? If the algorithm is better at predicting success than the human eye, do we have a moral obligation to listen to it, even if it tells us to decline an organ for a patient who's dying?
A machine deciding if an organ is alive enough to save a life? That is something to chew on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the metabolic detective work of transplantation.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time.